Thank you very much for everybody who's come today. The lovely image behind me was done by Ruth here, thank you.
Google AI, actually.
Showing how ugly our current dominant economic model is, extractive, destructive, and with an enormous wealth hierarchy that we're all subservient to. So, we're going to talk today about how we can break through the habits that keep us trapped in this model. And to start with, we need to accept a few very harsh existential realities, which are, to begin with, the situation of ecological overshoot. Now, ecological overshoot is a phenomenon that's defined as when humans are using every available bit of biocapacity on Earth. Now, back at in 100 years ago or so, when we had a population of about 2 billion, at that point we were using about half Earth. And the biologist E.O. Wilson suggested that that's the amount of biocapacity we need to allow for biodiversity to thrive. So we are a very long way off that at the moment. So since the 1970s, a chap called Paul Ehrlich and John Holdren, two environmentalists, came up with the insight that you can call the IPAT equation. He pointed out that the detrimental impact that humans have on the planet is driven by three key drivers: the growth in population size, the growth in affluence, and the increased reliance on technology. So all three of those drivers increase our degradation of the environment. So it's been going on for a very long time. I pressed the wrong button. Apologies for that. Try that. Okay. We're back in business. Right. So we have got this quite unrealistic aspiration that after decades of exponential growth, we can suddenly reduce our reliance on fossil fuels to the extent that we might meet net zero by 2050. And as you can see by the shape of that graph, it is really quite an unrealistic expectation. That's not to say it's not a good aspiration, it's just that it's not very helpful having aspirations that are not realistic. So on my website, you'll see a little animation, about 5 minutes, that explains that since the early 1920s, we have been detecting insect decline. So that's one of the main ways that we know that we're in a mass extinction event at the moment. And that degradation reflects the growth in our reliance on technology and the growth in our population size. So the last time that we were in a world that E.O. Wilson recommends was about 100 years ago, when we had about a quarter of the population that we have now and far less reliance on technology. So the logistics of reducing our consumption back to that sort of levels are very frightening and very huge. So to have the honesty to face up to that reality takes a great deal of moral courage.
We'll find that out on Monday.
So the model that we are addicted to in terms of our economy, we're expecting a percentage growth in our economy every year, and that creates an exponential growth. And we're clearly not achieving it at the moment, mainly because it's not a realistic expectation, but we still haven't let go of it. We're very addicted to that model at the moment. So as a result, our current usage amounts to about 12 billion global hectares, and Earth's biocapacity only offers 12 billion global hectares. Now, average consumption per capita for a human, scientists recommend about 2 global hectares for a fulfilled lifestyle. So for 8 billion to be having a fulfilled lifestyle, we would need considerably more than 12 billion. So about 16 billion global hectares, when 4 billion is what E.O. Wilson recommends. 6 billion, half of the total is what E.O. Wilson recommends.
Are you able to share these slides?
We're recording it, and I can certainly share the presentation.
Thank you very much.
So, we have a very unrealistic economic model, and I equate the way that we blot out the insights from the IPAT equation to not accept. It's like not accepting gravity, like jumping off a cliff and saying, I don't believe in gravity and I'm not going to bother with a parachute. So that's what we've been doing for decades. We've been ignoring those excellent insights and just saying we can carry on the way we always have done. And that's where the mindset shift comes in that I'm working on, suggesting that actually we need to look at things completely differently in order to have the remotest hope of doing anything wise in our current situation. So this is the essence of what I see as the paradigm shift, accepting the reality that the IPAT equation teaches us. Okay, so collectively, we are at the moment all saying, we're fine, don't need to worry, let's keep doing the same thing, let's keep having families, family focus is very important in our culture. We're not going to let go of growth economics, and we're very subservient to wealth inequality. The wealth hierarchy absolutely dominates it. We are especially seeing it in the USA, where their very wealthy billionaires have purchased the entire political scene and are completely dominating the direction that they're going in. Now, I recently learnt that our limbic response system, which kicks in when we're anxious, has got 2 knee-jerk reactions that I had not been aware of. Now, freeze, fight and flight are the standard ones that I think most people have heard of. But the ones that I didn't know about were fluency and follow. Now, fluency is when you've got a learned behaviour that you've been well versed in, and you say, oh, I know how to deal with that. I've done that before. I'm going to make a profit out of it even. This is what we do with growth economics. We've got a problem with the climate. I'm going to make the profit out of switching to green technology. And that sort of delusion is going on all over the world at the moment, especially the overdeveloped world. And the other one is the follow. The follow is where we respect our intellectuals who are going down this learned route and not teaching anything different. So that limbic system cuts out our rational reasoning. So there's no evaluation of is this wise. None of that is going on in most of our intellectuals. They're just saying, I've got my PhD, I've got this, I've got that, I know what I'm doing. And they don't even start to question whether the basic principles are right or wrong. Okay. Now, Donella Meadows talks about different leverage points. And right at the top of the leverage points, the thing that actually drives success is the collective aspiration, okay? And we have quite a few global aspirations. Can anybody think of any offhand, a global aspiration that we've all agreed to, pretty much.
Eradicate malaria.
That's not quite something that is emblazoned. The sort of thing I'm thinking of, so sorry, this is Danella Meadows, and I'm going to talk about the, oops, right. So what I'm thinking about, things like the Declaration of Human Rights, the Sustainable Development Goals, big ideas that we came up and said, this is a really good idea, okay? And they are really good ideas. Really good. The 1.5 target, net zero by 2050. Lovely idea. Not realistic. All very lovely ideas. We also have defining our cultural paradigm. Things like sticking with this addiction to exponential growth, sticking with the affection for the nuclear family, and there was even, what was Moral Maze, BBC Moral Maze. I was actually asked to participate in this episode, but I missed out to someone else. But the subject of this particular episode was, is it a moral obligation to have children? Now, I thought that was a ridiculous premise. Here we are in decades of chronic overshoot, and we have apparently a society that thinks there's a moral obligation to bring children into this mess. Well, I am sorry, but that infuriates me that nobody is questioning that fat logic. It's pathetic, absolutely pathetic. Then there's the growing wealth inequality, which is actually a consequence of persisting with exponential growth, because we keep printing money, and all of that money, especially in the COVID crisis, goes straight into the coffers of the people who own the assets. So as Gary Stevenson is explaining really brilliantly, all the money we're printing is just expanding the wealth inequality that exists. So here we have on one side some really good aspirations, and on the other side a set of cultural behaviours which ensure that we're never going to achieve those aspirations. So this is a completely impossible set of aspirations. So we have to ditch all three of those aspirations if we're going to stand any chance of surviving and allowing life on Earth to survive. So I'm suggesting a new aspiration that would sit like the Declaration of Human Rights, at the same level of aspiration, where we say, okay, we admit when we did the Declaration of Human Rights, we totally forgot that we have to operate within the constraints of the planet. And therefore, we need this aspiration to get back within the carrying capacity of the planet. And from that aspiration, all the ingenuity that I'm seeing in the sustainable development field would then be able to flourish, would then be able to come into being. At the moment, it falls on the altar of growth economics. So to actually embrace an aspiration like this, you have to have a collective sense of moral duty, so that you say, right, life on Earth is actually more important than my little life. I'm more concerned about life on Earth surviving than I am about number one. And that would enable us to expand the Ubuntu philosophy to include other life forms, so we share equally and give them a chance to have a habitat, rather than covering the entire world with concrete. How am I doing for time? Oh, that's all right. Right. So, the paradigm shift is a fascinating place to work in. You meet a lady, called it the void, that I was speaking to. You get this blank look. We don't do that. Oh no, we do growth. We don't do anything else. We can't do anything else. Don't be so ridiculous. And you will see it at the highest levels of our academic institutions. And I go quite a lot to Oxford Martin School, beautiful building, it's placed in Oxford. And they do public lectures. And I go along and ask difficult questions. And Oxford Martin School was founded by a chap called James Martin, who came up with this lovely slogan, "We can make any world we want," which is a lovely inspirational slogan. But like many of our aspirations, it's not tethered in reality. So if we were to qualify that and say, we can make whatever kind of world we want, so long as we stay within the biophysical limits of our planet, then it might actually be an achievable inspiration. But as it stands on its own without any connection to reality, it just represents the delusion and the fairy tales that go on in a sustainable world, or the profession of sustainability. They're living in a complete fairy tale at the moment because they are not taking account of the overshoot. They're not even addressing. We talk about getting rid of CO2 in the atmosphere. We're not talking about repaying our ecological debts at all. So I'm saying, because I am not an academic, and I think that has saved me because I might have gone down that route. But fortunately, I married a very sensible fellow, down to earth, very practical. And from him, I learnt what common sense is and developed some of my own. So I'm working as a bridge between the academics, because I have got a degree in maths and physics, so I've got a certain amount of academic ability. And on the other hand, I've got a lot of very sensible, down-to-earth friends who can see that what I'm saying makes sense. But they have no voice, absolutely no voice in these academic arenas. So I'm coming in because I realised that people like Kate Raworth and Gary Stevenson and less is more, Jason Hickel, they cannot do what I'm doing. They cannot step out and say, oh, we've got a problem with overpopulation, because I have seen what you get when you say something like that. You get pushback, you get blank. Don't tell me that. Don't tell me we're in deep trouble. I don't want to know. Everything's fine. We just keep doing what we're doing, and we can do more growth economics. We can get out of it that way. It's that much of an addiction that we're up against. Very, very deep. It's learned from very young age, coercive consumerism. It's so much part of our culture, growth economics. And if there isn't a profit, if there isn't a financial profit at the end of it, people will reject the idea. Say, no, you can't do that. You're not going to make a profit. Well, I'm sorry, there's no profit in repaying our ecological debts. No financial profit. There's a great deal of spiritual profit and a great deal of ecological profit to be had. So that's where we need to just alter our values and our aspirations. Now I look at it as a spectrum, because everybody's somewhere on the spectrum. And down in the dark on the left-hand side here, left and the bottom, you've got people clinging to pronatalism, clinging to growth economics, clinging to the wealth hierarchy. Then you've got the people gently saying, well, maybe well-being's more important than money, and perhaps we should stop thinking about this silly exponential growth. Maybe we can reuse all our waste. None of that really addresses the ecological debt. Kate Raworth has upgraded her donut economics in the second edition to recognise that you do need to shrink the economy if you're ever going to be sustainable. So she's joined mainstream degrowth. And then as far as I know, I'm pretty much alone up in the top right-hand corner there, saying actually we need to start thinking about maximum mitigation. And that involves minimising our birth rates, globally this is, and minimising consumption per capita, rather than trying to maintain such a toxic system that we have installed. And you can also look at it as a spectrum of sanity. So down at the bottom, you've got people with extremely bad mental health, struggling to keep up with the hamster wheel that we've developed, and drug addiction, all sorts going on there. And we've got denial, delusion, hypocrisy, a lot of arrogance going on down there. We can do this, we can do it the way we've always done it. Then we've got to get over the limbic response that doesn't apply any rational thought to the situation. And beyond that, we've then got the cultural barriers that we're not allowed to talk about challenging the wealthy. We're not, because they'll leave the country.
What's Overton window?
Oh, the Overton window was a term that they use in advertising, where they talk about the arena of discourse. There are taboo. There are some things you're not allowed to talk about. Now, the Overton window on these topics has shifted a great deal, especially in the last year. Gary Stevenson has done some terrific job getting wealth inequality on the discussion table, and I'm one of the ones working on pronatalism. There's other people like Nandita Bajaj, who's done some excellent research papers. She works with an organisation called Population Balance. Overconsumption, all the well-being and post-growth workers are all nibbling at that concept, but not really. They're not really saying we need to minimise our consumption per capita. They're saying we need to lessen it a bit. They're not being ambitious. Okay, so right at the top, maximum mitigation. That's where you're starting to say we really need to minimise. We need to protect the unborn from the mess that we're in at the moment, at least until we can reorganise ourselves. And we just need to minimise our consumption per capita to give Earth a chance to recover from the mess that we've made. So that it's collective insanity that we've got at the moment in most arenas. We've got a lot of things going on in LinkedIn, where I recently had a post go, I got about 1,000 likes and over 100 reposts. So it shows that the mood is, minds are opening to more radical ideas. And so I've got so many people connecting with me now. And a chap called Mathis Wackernagle, who is the expert on ecological footprint, sent me a lovely message saying thank you for mentioning my work. So I'm optimistic that with the recording that we're making today, it will be seen quite widely. So I'm hoping it'll help a lot of people to see where the barriers are and how far we could go if we were ambitious. So that's the hope going forwards, and I think the zeitgeist is coming together for that to happen now. So this is my role. Everybody has a different role in the paradigm shift. What Jason Hickel and Kate Wayworth and the other leaders are doing there is invaluable. I stepped in because I knew that somebody with a profile could not talk about the things that I talk about. I thought it has to be someone who's got nothing to lose, nobody's to embarrass, no organisation or university that's going to look and say, oh no, what's she doing to our name, I can do that because I'm just, an isolated individual saying, excuse me, you're being a bit silly. There's a collective suicide that I'm watching, and I think you ought to rethink. I'm not giving the details about what we ought to do going forwards. That's for the specialists who are all out there, and many of them desperately with excellent ideas, but nobody's listening to them because it's not got a profit in it. So, at the moment, we live in a world that is so wasteful. Every democratic election we have, all the discussion about Brexit was all pointless because none of our politicians are suggesting that we change the paradigm. So they're all pointing us in the same suicidal direction. So until we actually get the mindset shift, the whole of the democratic procedure is just digging us deeper into the mess that we're already in. And education comes in there as well, because education is not saying actually we need to think very differently about big things like whether we have a family or not, whether we do work for the wealth hierarchy, perhaps. And it's extremely difficult. If you want to survive, you've got to work, haven't you? And then you've got to become part of the system. And then once you've got your children, you haven't got any mental time or energy to think about the big picture. And that's where I'm lucky, because I'm, retired, got time, energy. So I've been able to look at and learn at how obstructed we are in actually thinking outside the box of growth economics. So if we look at something simple like the drinks industry, we spend millions just packaging and transporting what is essentially water. The only drink we need to survive is clean water. We've got a whole redundant industry there. And I'm sorry, because I know you love your whiskey. Sorry about that. Okay. But, you can say the saying, the fashion industry, it's there to make you tired of the clothes that you've got and waste whatever you... Anyway, our judicial system is basically propping up business as usual. Most of it is about protecting the wealthy. And travel, I've got some interesting ideas about. I would really like everybody to be entitled to subsistence, shelter, and certainly in the case of the young, the ability, everybody should be entitled to shelter. And it shouldn't matter where they are in the world. They should be able to go anywhere in the world, integrate into that society, give what skills they have to give to that society, and experience the cultures, the lovely diverse cultures that we have in the world. But this is it's only once we get to the global level of a whole new aspiration that we can think of implementing that type of travel. The sort of travel we've got at the moment is so destructive to the local culture. I've seen it in Greece. What were little taverns have been pushed out by the all-in package in the hotels, so the guests don't even step out of the hotel to try the lovely little taverns that used to exist. Anyway, SUVs are an example of the Jevons paradox, where we make energy more efficient, and then we just go and buy a bigger car to overexploit what's available. The healthcare system is incredibly eco-costly, and I say there's a moral argument there, because we've got 2 to 3 billion people threatened with food insecurity, and we spend enormous sums of money keeping people alive who would naturally pass on, and we need a different approach to death. We need to accept that death is a very important part of life, because that enables new life to flourish. And so I'm suggesting two things, in fact: a wealth cap and a health cap, so that if the ecological footprint of your health needs goes over a certain level, then we need to have some way of saying, well, maybe, we ought to be redirecting these resources to keeping people who are perfectly healthy alive, who are now currently dying from starvation. Especially with our history in the UK of colonialism and debt diplomacy, and putting our colonies into debt and dependent on us. So this is Greta Thunberg, very much an inspiration to me when I started out 5 years ago. She very wisely said, what's the point of going to school when you lot are destroying my planet for me? No one is too small to make a difference. We all have a role to play in the shift. Firstly, to recognise that the shift is needed, and then you will then you just need to think to yourself, well, what skills have I got that I can bring to help this to happen and to accelerate it? Because the shift is happening now very rapidly. Fortunately. I'm hoping to retire as a paradigm shifter soon. Okay. It's interesting, I was talking to my friend here just the other day about, to him that hath shall be given, and exactly what it was talking about. And I Googled it, and it does actually talk about those who cultivate their existing blessings, and it puts wealth in there. And wealth is a very difficult concept here, because if we're looking at wealth as finance, then I'm afraid that phrase is starting to encourage wealth inequality. But if we look at wealth as ecological wealth, then we get a much wiser perspective on things. Because at the moment, all our decisions completely ignoring ecological wealth, with no attempt at all to repay our ecological debts. And because of that skewed perspective, we can't help ourselves doing more damage with every decision that we make. It's because we've got a fundamentally flawed perception of what wealth is. Because the only thing that can keep us alive is ecological wealth, not you can't eat money. You can eat crops. To have crops, you need an ecological balance. And so that's where the priority has to lie. How did I do? Oh, not too far over. Thank you very much. And